A little boy approached a millionaire at the airport and said, "I'm looking for my father." What he discovered left him speechless. The international airport buzzed with the frenetic energy of thousands of lives in transit. Under the fluorescent lights that bathed the main concourse, a 10-year-old boy with a worn-out backpack and determination in his eyes stood out from the crowd. Lucas took a deep breath, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. His eyes anxiously scanned the faces around him, searching until he finally found him. There he was, the man from the photo. Tall, impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than everything Lucas had ever owned. Edward Smith, the famous businessman, walked with the confidence of someone used to commanding the world around him. Lucas hesitated for a moment, his courage threatening to fail. What if he was wrong? What if the photo, yellowed with age and worn at the edges, had deceived him? But no, he would recognize that face anywhere. It was the same one that looked out from the photo hidden at the back of his mother's drawer, the same that appeared in newspapers and magazines. With one last breath to gather his courage, Lucas crossed the concourse. His legs trembled slightly, but his steps were determined. He approached the man who could change his life forever. "Excuse me, sir," Lucas said, his voice steadier than he expected. Edward Smith stopped, looking down with a mildly irritated expression that quickly transformed into surprise upon seeing the boy. "I'm looking for my father," Lucas continued, his eyes fixed on the man. "And I think it's you." Time seemed to freeze. The airport's hum disappeared, and for a moment there were only Lucas and Edward, connected by words that hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning and possibilities. Edward paled, his eyes widening in shock. For an instant, something, recognition, fear, flickered in his gaze. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, replaced by a mask of confusion and discomfort. "What are you talking about, kid?" Edward finally responded, his voice tense. "You must be confusing me with someone else." But Lucas would not be easily deterred. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out the worn photo. "Look, it's you here with my mother. 10 years ago." Edward stared at the photo, and for a moment his composure wavered. His face was a canvas of conflicting emotions, recognition, panic, and something deeper, more painful. Before either of them could say anything more, 2 airport security guards approached as drawn by the unusual scene. "Is there a problem here, Mr. Smith?" one of them asked, casting a suspicious glance at Lucas. Edward seemed to snap out of a trance. "No, there's no problem," he said quickly, regaining his composure. "Just a misunderstanding." Lucas felt panic rising. He couldn't let this chance slip away. Please," he pleaded. "I just need a minute to—" "I'm sorry, kid," Edward interrupted, his voice now cold and distant. "But you're making a mistake. I'm not who you think I am." With a nod to the security guards, Edward walked away quickly, leaving Lucas standing there, holding a photo that seemed to mock him with its unfulfilled promises. As he watched the man who could be his father disappear into the crowd, Lucas felt a mix of disappointment and determination solidify in his chest. That brief interaction, that moment of recognition in Edward's eyes, Lucas was sure there was more to this story than met the eye, and he was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how impossible it might seem. When the security guards gently escorted him out of the restricted area, Lucas did not protest. His mind was already racing, planning his next move, because now he knew his quest was just beginning. And somewhere in that airport, Edward Smith hurried into a VIP lounge, his hands trembling as he reached for his phone. He needed to make an urgent call, because the past he had worked so hard to bury had just resurfaced in the form of a determined boy with all too familiar eyes. The game had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The small apartment in the suburbs of New York always seemed smaller than it really was to Lucas. Perhaps it was the weight of unspoken secrets that occupied every corner, every shadow. At 10 years old, Lucas had already learned to read his mother Maria's silences as well as the words in his school books. That morning, like so many others, Lucas watched his mother prepare for another long day of work. Maria, at 35, marked by lines of premature worry, adjusted her nurse's uniform with the efficiency of someone who had repeated the gesture thousands of times. "Lucas, dear," she said, running her fingers through her son's dark hair. "Be a good boy today, okay? Mrs. Johnson will come by later to stay with you." Lucas nodded, swallowing the questions that always threatened to spill over. Questions about his father, about the past his mother guarded so zealously. Instead, he smiled, trying to ease the constant worry in Maria's eyes. "Don't worry, Mom, I'll be fine." With one last hurried kiss, Maria left, leaving Lucas alone with his thoughts and insatiable curiosity. It was in that solitude, in that silence laden with unresolved mysteries, that Lucas made the discovery that would change everything. He hadn't planned to rummage through his mother's things. He was just looking for an extra notebook for school when his hands touched something at the bottom of the drawer. A photo, hidden under piles of papers and keepsakes. With his heart racing, Lucas pulled the image into the light. There, smiling shyly at the camera, was his mother, younger and with a sparkle in her eyes that he had never seen in person. Next to her were two men. One had his arm around Maria, his smile broad and confident. The other, Lucas gasped. The other man, he recognized immediately, Edward Smith, the famous businessman whose face often appeared in newspapers and on TV. The man who Lucas had always suspected could be his father. The photo trembled in his hands as 1,000 questions exploded in his mind. Why had his mother never mentioned knowing someone so famous? Who was the other man? And why? Why would she keep this a secret for so long? In the days that followed, Lucas found himself consumed by the need to know more. He researched everything he could about Edward Smith, memorizing every detail of his public life. Born into a humble family, Edward had built an empire from nothing, becoming one of the most successful businessmen in the country. But the more Lucas discovered, the more questions arose. How did his mother, a simple nurse, meet someone like Edward? And why had she never talked about it? Lucas's determination grew with each passing day. He knew his mother would never tell him voluntarily. Years of careful and indirect questions had proven that, if he wanted answers, he would have to seek them out himself. It was then that he overheard by chance a conversation between his mother and a friend. Edward Smith would be at the international airport that week, returning from a business trip. In that moment, Lucas made his decision. He would go to the airport. He would find Edward Smith, and he would finally discover the truth about his father. The plan was risky, almost impossible for a 10-year-old boy, but Lucas was determined. He saved his lunch money, memorized bus routes, and waited for the right day. On the fateful morning, with his heart pounding in his chest and the photo carefully tucked in his pocket, Lucas told his mother he would go to the library after school. The lie left a bitter taste in his mouth, but he convinced himself it was necessary. For the truth, for the right to know his origins. The journey to the airport was a haze of anxiety and anticipation. Lucas mentally rehearsed what he would say, how he would approach the man who might be his father. Every scenario in his mind ended with answers, with the truth finally coming to light. When he finally arrived at the bustling airport concourse, Lucas felt the weight of his mission. There, among hundreds of hurried strangers, he would seek the answers that had shaped his life without him knowing. With the photo clutched in his sweaty hand and his heart thundering in his ears, Lucas spotted Edward Smith, tall, well-dressed, exactly as in the newspaper photos. Exactly as in the image hidden for so long. Taking a deep breath, gathering all the courage his 10 years could muster, Lucas stepped forward. This was the moment to discover the truth, no matter how impossible it might be. "Excuse me, sir," he said, his voice steadier than he expected. "I'm looking for my father. And I think it's you." And with those words, Lucas took the first step on a journey that would change his life forever, a quest for the truth that would prove more complicated and dangerous than he could ever imagine. Edward Smith's luxurious car cut through the streets of New York like a shark in turbulent waters. In the back seat, the businessman loosened his tie, feeling suffocated. The encounter at the airport with that boy, Lucas, had shaken the foundations of his carefully constructed world. "To the office, James," he ordered the driver, his voice betraying an unusual tremor. As the city blurred past the window, Edward's mind dove into the past, a place he had avoided for years. Flashback. 20 years earlier, Edward was just another ambitious young man from a humble background. By his side, always, was his brother Charlie, brilliant, charismatic, and impulsive. Together, they dreamed of conquering the business world. It was at a college party that they met Maria. Beautiful, shy, and determined to become a nurse, Charlie fell in love instantly. Edward felt something he preferred not to name. The three became inseparable. Study nights, shared dreams, promises of a bright future. Until Edward's ambition and Charlie's impulsiveness collided in a risky business venture. "This is our chance, Edward," Charlie insisted, his eyes gleaming with the possibility of quick wealth. Edward hesitated. "It's too dangerous, Charlie. Illegal." "Since when are you afraid of taking risks?" Charlie provoked. "Think of everything we could achieve." In the end, Edward relented. The plan was simple. Use insider information for a big investment. They would get rich overnight. But something went wrong. Terribly wrong. End of flashback. "We've arrived, sir." James's voice brought Edward back to the present. In the silence of his office, Edward poured himself a generous dose of whiskey, his hands still trembling slightly. Lucas's face, so much like Charlie's, haunted him. "Impossible," he murmured to himself. "He can't be, not after all this time." But the resemblance was undeniable. The same determined eyes, the same stubborn chin. It was like seeing a ghost from the past. Edward walked to his desk, opening a secret drawer. From it, he took an old photo, him, Charlie, and Maria, smiling and carefree. Before everything fell apart, with trembling fingers, he picked up the phone. "Renato, it's Edward. I need you to investigate someone for me. A boy named Lucas, son of Maria Johnson." As he gave the details to his trusted private investigator, Edward's mind raced. If Lucas was who he suspected, it changed everything. All the sacrifices, all the lies of the past years. "I want everything, Renato. Birth certificate, school records, friends, routine, and be discreet. No one can know about this." Hanging up the phone, Edward turned to the window, looking out at the city he had helped shape. His empire, built on the ruins of his past, now seemed as fragile as a house of cards. Another flashback hit him. The last time he saw Charlie, a heated argument, harsh words exchanged, the sound of tires screeching on a rainy night, and then silence, a silence that lasted for years. "What have I done?" Edward whispered to his reflection in the glass. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his dark thoughts. "Sir, Dad?" The voice of Sophia, his 17-year-old daughter, sounded hesitant. "Is everything okay? You left the airport so quickly?" Edward forced a smile, turning to face his daughter. Sophia, so perceptive, so much like the mother he had lost years ago. Another loss, another secret. "Everything's fine, dear, just complicated business." Sophia studied him with keen eyes. "Listen, are you sure? You seem disturbed." For a moment, Edward considered telling her everything, about Charlie, about Maria, about the boy at the airport. But fear of losing his daughter's respect, of unearthing long-buried ghosts, stopped him. "Nothing you need to worry about," he assured, hating himself for the lie. After Sophia left, not entirely convinced, Edward turned his attention to the computer. He had work to do, an investigation to conduct, a past to confront. As the first emails to his contacts were sent, Edward couldn't shake the feeling that he had started something he could no longer control. Like a train derailing in slow motion, he watched his carefully constructed world begin to crumble. And at the center of it all was Lucas, a boy determined to find his father, not knowing he was about to unearth secrets that could destroy lives. Night fell over New York, and with it, the certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The apartment was immersed in a tense silence when Lucas entered. He knew this moment would come, but nothing could have prepared him for the look on his mother's face. Maria was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea long gone cold, her eyes fixed on the door. "Where have you been?" Maria's voice was low, controlled, but Lucas could feel the storm brewing behind her words. Lucas hesitated, his heart hammering in his chest. I went to the airport," he finally admitted, deciding that the truth, no matter how difficult, was the only way. Maria closed her eyes, as if Lucas's words were a physical blow. When she opened them again, they were filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. "You saw him, didn't you? Edward Smith." His mother's confirmation made Lucas gasp. So it was true. She really knew the millionaire. "Why, Mom?" Lucas asked, his voice trembling with emotion. "Why did you never tell me about him? Is he my father?" Maria stood abruptly, turning to the window. For a long moment, only the sound of the clock on the wall broke the silence. "Lucas," she finally spoke, her voice heavy with years of contained secrets. "There are things about the past, about your origins, that are complicated. Things I wanted to protect you from knowing. But I have the right to know," Lucas exclaimed, years of frustration spilling over. "All my life, I've felt like a part of me was missing. And now you think you've found the answers," Maria completed, turning to face her son. Her eyes were brimming with tears. "Oh, Lucas, if you only knew." She walked to an old chest in the corner of the room, one Lucas had always seen but never dared to open. With trembling hands, Maria unlocked it. "A long time ago," she began, rummaging through the chest's contents, "I met two brothers, Edward and Charlie Smith. We were young, full of dreams and ambitions." Lucas approached, his eyes widening as he saw his mother pull out a stack of old photographs and letters. Charlie was impetuous, full of life. Edward was more cautious, more calculating. Maria paused, lost in memories. "We fell in love, Charlie and I. We planned to marry, have a family." "So Charlie is my father?" Lucas asked, confused. Maria hesitated. "It's complicated, Lucas. Charlie, he disappeared before you were born. There was an accident, a business deal gone wrong. Edward, he changed after that, we all did." She handed Lucas a photo. In it, 3 young people smiled. His mother, Edward, and a man who looked very much like both Edward and Lucas. "This is Charlie," Maria said softly. "Your uncle." Lucas studied the photo, his mind spinning. "But Dad, if Charlie disappeared, then who?" "Lucas," Maria interrupted, her voice firm despite the tears in her eyes. "There are things that happened back then, things I can't fully explain now. But I need you to understand, going after Edward was dangerous. There are secrets that could hurt many people." Lucas felt a mix of frustration and fear growing inside him. "So, but Mom, I need to know, who is my father? Why did Edward seem to recognize me? Why is everything so secret?" Maria held her son's hands, her gaze intense. "Promise me, Lucas. Promise you won't go after Edward or try to find out more on your own. It's too dangerous." Before Lucas could respond, the phone rang, making them both jump. Maria answered, her face paling as she listened. "I understand," she said to the person on the other end, her voice trembling slightly. "Yes, I know what this means." She hung up, turning to Lucas with a look of pure fear. "We need to go. Now." "Go? Where? What's happening?" Lucas asked, alarmed by his mother's sudden urgency. "There's no time to explain," Maria said, already moving to grab a suitcase. "Take only the essentials. We need to leave the city." As his mother moved frantically around the apartment, Lucas stood frozen, holding the photo of his mother with the Smith brothers. He had sought answers, but now he realized that each answer brought with it a dozen new questions. Quickly, without his mother noticing, he tucked the photo into his pocket along with some of the letters from the chest. If they were fleeing, he would take with him the only clues he had about his past. When they left the apartment minutes later, Lucas cast one last look at the home he had always known. He didn't know where they were going or what they were running from, but one thing was certain. His search for the truth about his father was far from over. And as the taxi took them away, Lucas silently vowed that no matter how impossible it seemed, he would uncover the truth about his family, about Edward and Charlie Smith, and about the secrets his mother fought so desperately to keep buried. The afternoon sun cast long shadows over the city park as Lucas, exhausted and confused, sat on a solitary bench. 3 days had passed since their hurried escape from the apartment, and the questions in his mind only multiplied. His mother, Maria, was staying at an old friend's house, reluctant to share more information. Lost in thought, Lucas barely noticed the girl approaching until she spoke. "Hey, you're the kid from the airport, aren't you?" Lucas looked up, surprised. Standing before him was a teenage girl with dark hair and keen eyes. There was something familiar about her. "I'm Sophia," she introduced herself, sitting down beside him without waiting for an invitation. "Edward Smith's daughter." Lucas's heart raced. How did you find me?" Sophia shrugged, a mysterious smile playing on her lips. "It wasn't hard. My father's been, let's say, distracted since the incident at the airport. It wasn't complicated to hack into his computer and find the details of the investigation about you." Lucas stared at her, torn between admiration and distrust. "Why are you looking for me?" "Because," Sophia replied, leaning closer, "just like you, I want answers. My father has been keeping secrets for years, and I think you're the key to uncovering them." For a moment, Lucas considered running. His mother had warned him about the dangers, but curiosity and the desire for answers were stronger. "What do you know?" he asked cautiously. Sophia pulled a small tablet from her bag. "Not much, but enough to start. My father has always been secretive about the past, especially about his brother, Charlie. But since you showed up, he's been acting strange, making secret calls, digging through old files." She showed Lucas a series of emails and documents. "Look at this. Records of bank transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands, dated years ago. And this name here, repeatedly, Project Phoenix." Lucas frowned, trying to process the information. "What does it mean?" "I'm not sure," Sophia admitted, "but I think it has something to do with my Uncle Charlie's disappearance, and possibly with you." Lucas hesitated before pulling the photo from his pocket, the one showing his mother with Edward and Charlie. "My mother gave me this before we fled. She said Charlie was my uncle, but—" Sophia studied the photo, her eyes widening. "Wait, this doesn't make sense. If Charlie is your uncle, then my father would be—" "My father," Lucas completed. "But my mother didn't confirm that. In fact, she seemed to want to avoid talking about who my father really is." Sophia was silent for a moment, processing. "There's something more here, something we're not seeing." She began typing furiously on her tablet. "Look at this. Hospital records from about 11 years ago. An emergency admission for Charlie Smith, right before his official disappearance." Lucas leaned in to see better. "What happened to him?" "It doesn't say specifically, but there are mentions of experimental treatment and Project Phoenix in the records." A shiver ran down Lucas's spine. "Do you think that something happened to Charlie? Something related to this mysterious project?" Sophia nodded slowly. "And somehow you're connected to all this. The resemblance between you and the old photos of my Uncle Charlie is incredible, almost as if—" She stopped, her eyes widening with a sudden realization. "What?" Lucas pressed. "It's impossible," Sophia murmured. "Yeah, but what if somehow you're not the son of either Edward or Charlie, but a younger version of Charlie himself?" Lucas felt as if the air had been knocked out of his lungs. "That's crazy. How could that be possible?" Sophia shook her head, equally stunned by the idea. "I don't know, cloning, some kind of crazy scientific experiment. It sounds like science fiction, but it would explain a lot." The two teenagers looked at each other, the magnitude of the possible truth weighing on them. "We need to investigate more," Sophia said finally, determination shining in her eyes. "Together, are you with me?" Lucas hesitated, thinking of his mother, the warnings about the danger. But the desire to know the truth, no matter how impossible it seemed, was stronger. "I am," he replied, extending his hand to seal the pact. As they shook hands, Lucas and Sophia had no idea of the forces they had just set in motion. On a park bench, under the setting sun, an unlikely alliance had formed, one that threatened to unearth long-buried secrets and change the course of their lives forever. Edward Smith's office, usually a sanctuary of power and control, now felt suffocating. Sitting in his leather chair, Edward absent-mindedly twirled an old silver lighter between his fingers, a gift from Charlie so many years ago. Flashback. "Happy birthday, little brother," Charlie smiled, handing the package to Edward. Edward laughed. "You know I'm only 5 minutes younger, right? 5 minutes that make all the difference." Charlie winked. "Far, now open it." The lighter gleamed in the light, the initials C and E engraved on the side. "For when we reach the top," Charlie said, his eyes gleaming with ambition. "Together." End of flashback. Edward closed his eyes, guilt consuming him. If he had known then how things would end. A knock on the door brought him back to the present. His secretary entered, looking nervous. "Mr. Smith, there's a man here to see you. He says it's about Project Phoenix." Edward paled. "Send him in and cancel all my appointments for today." Moments later, a middle-aged man with graying hair and tired eyes entered the room. "Dr. Mendez," Edward greeted coldly. "So I thought we agreed never to see each other again." The man sat heavily. "Circumstances have changed, Edward. The boy, he showed up, didn't he?" Edward nodded stiffly. "Then it's time to face the truth," Dr. Mendez sighed. "Project Phoenix. Charlie, everything is about to come to light." Meanwhile, in a cafe across town, Lucas and Sophia were hunched over a table covered in papers and a laptop. "Look at this," Sophia pointed to the screen. "Records of a research facility closed 10 years ago. The name of the main project, Phoenix." Lucas frowned. "Twice, what were they researching there?" "It doesn't say specifically, but there are mentions of advanced cellular regeneration and experimental genetic therapy." Lucas felt a chill. "And what does this have to do with Charlie?" Sophia typed quickly. "Well, look at this list of patients. Most are just numbers, but this one," she pointed to a name, Patient C.S., admitted shortly before the official disappearance of Charlie Smith. "My God," Lucas murmured. "What did they do to him?" Sophia hesitated. "Lucas, what if they weren't just trying to cure Charlie? What if they were trying to recreate him?" The silence that followed was heavy, laden with impossible implications. "But that's crazy," Lucas finally said. It can't be true." Sophia placed a comforting hand on his. "I know it seems impossible, but think, it would explain why you look so much like the old photos of Charlie, why my father was so disturbed when he saw you, why your mother has been so evasive about your origin." Lucas felt his head spinning. It was too much to process. He was Lucas, son of Maria. But what if he was more than that? If he was, in some impossible way, a second chance for Charlie? "We need more information," he said finally. "We need to find someone who was involved in this Project Phoenix." Sophia nodded, returning to the laptop. After a few minutes of intense searching, her eyes lit up. "I found something. Dr. Antonio Mendez, the lead researcher on the project. He still lives in New York. We have to talk to him," Lucas said, determination shining in his eyes. Back at Edward's office, the conversation with Dr. Mendez had taken a dark turn. "You don't understand, Edward," Mendez argued. "The project never really ended. Charlie, what we did to him is just the tip of the iceberg." Edward stood abruptly. "Enough, I buried this story years ago. Charlie is dead. The boy is just a coincidence." Mendez laughed bitterly. "Do you really believe that? Look at him, Edward. Look into his eyes and tell me you don't see your brother." Edward turned to the window, his hands trembling. "What do you want from me? The truth needs to come out," Mendez said softly. "For Charlie, for the boy, for all of us, At that moment, Edward's phone rang. It was his daughter, Sophia. "Dad," she said, her voice tense. "We need to talk. About Uncle Charlie. About Lucas." Edward closed his eyes, feeling the weight of decades of secrets pressing down on him. The past, long buried, was resurfacing with full force, and he knew he could no longer contain it. "Come home, Sophia," he said finally. "It's time to tell the truth. All of it." As the sun set over New York, the players in this complex drama moved toward an inevitable confrontation. Lucas and Sophia armed with their investigation, Edward ready to face his demons, and hovering over everything, the mystery of Charlie and Project Phoenix, a truth so impossible it threatened to redefine everything they believed about family, identity, and the limits of science. The night promised to be long, and the revelations overwhelming. Night fell over New York as Lucas and Sophia arrived at the Smith mansion. Lucas's heart pounded furiously, a mix of anxiety and anticipation coursing through his veins. Sophia squeezed his hand reassuringly before opening the door. Edward awaited them in the office, his face a mask of tension. Beside him stood a man Lucas did not recognize, but whose tired eyes seemed to carry the weight of many secrets. "Sophia, Lucas," Edward began, his voice hoarse, "this is Dr. Mendez. He has some things to tell us." Dr. Mendez cleared his throat, looking directly at Lucas. "Young man, what do you know about your origins?" Lucas hesitated, exchanging a quick glance with Sophia. I always thought I was the son of Maria Johnson, but recently I discovered connections to the Smith family that I can't explain." Mendez nodded gravely. "The truth, Lucas, is more complex and, frankly, more incredible than you can imagine." He paused, as if gathering courage. "You are not the son of Maria, nor of Edward, nor even of Charlie. You are Charlie." The silence that followed was deafening. Lucas felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. "That's impossible," he whispered. 10 years ago, Mendez continued, we were working on a revolutionary project called Phoenix. The goal was nothing less than complete human regeneration. Charlie Smith, gravely injured in an accident, became our first and only test subject. Edward intervened, his voice trembling. "Charlie was dying. I agreed to the procedure. We thought we could save him." "And did you save him?" Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mendez shook his head. "Not in the way we expected. Charlie's body didn't survive. But we managed to preserve his consciousness and his memories, his DNA. And then, you created me," Lucas completed, the realization hitting him like a punch. "Yes," Mendez confirmed, "you are, essentially, Charlie reborn, a perfect clone. But more than that, you carry his memories, though they are dormant, buried in your subconscious." Lucas staggered, feeling dizzy. Sophia held him, guiding him to a chair. "This is madness," she murmured. "How is this even possible?" "The science behind it is complicated," Mendez explained. "We used a combination of advanced cloning and consciousness transfer. The process took years to perfect." Edward, who had been silent, finally spoke. "When you were born, or reborn, I panicked. The project had gone too far. I gave you to Maria, a nurse who worked on the project, to raise you away from all this." Lucas felt tears burning his eyes. "So Maria, she's not my mother. She is the person who raised you, who loved you," Edward said softly. "So in every way that matters, she is your mother." As Lucas struggled to process these revelations, Edward's phone rang. His face paled as he saw the number. "Maria," he answered, putting it on speaker. Maria's voice sounded, trembling and scared. "Edward, they know. Someone found out about Lucas, about the project. I received a threat." Lucas stood abruptly. "Mom? Are you okay? What threat?" "Lucas?" Maria's voice broke. "Oh, my dear, I'm so sorry for everything." "What kind of threat, Maria?" Edward pressed, his face a mask of concern. "A man approached me today. He said he knew about Project Phoenix, about Lucas's true identity. He threatened to expose everything if we don't hand over the subject for further studies. Lucas felt a shiver run down his spine. Studies? They want to use me as a guinea pig. Dr. Mendez stood, alarmed. This cannot happen. The knowledge behind Project Phoenix, in the wrong hands, it could be catastrophic. Edward made a quick decision. Maria, come here immediately. We'll arrange for security to escort you. After the call ended, a heavy silence fell over the room. Lucas, still trying to process his own identity, now faced a new threat. What do we do now? Sophia asked, breaking the silence. Edward exchanged a look with Mendez. We need to protect Lucas and find out who is behind these threats. But what about me? Lucas asked, his voice trembling. How do I deal with this? He gestured to himself, to the room, to the impossible situation he found himself in. Mendez approached, placing a gentle hand on Lucas's shoulder. Your memories, Charlie's memories, are in there. With time and proper treatment, we could access them. You could remember who you were, who you are. Lucas shook his head, overwhelmed. I don't know if I want to remember. I am Lucas. This is the only life I know. And that is the life that matters now, Edward said firmly. No matter how you came to be, Lucas, you are family, and we will protect you. As the night wore on, the group began to make plans to protect Lucas, to uncover who was behind the threats, and to deal with the monumental implications of the night's revelations. Lucas, sitting quietly amid the whirlwind of activity, looked at his hands, the hands of a 10-year-old boy who, in some impossible way, carried the memories and legacy of a man who died a decade ago. His journey to discover the truth about his father had ended in a way he could never have imagined. But a new journey, even more complex and dangerous, was just beginning. And as the night pulsed outside, indifferent to the dramas unfolding inside the Smith mansion, Lucas knew that nothing in his life would ever be the same again. Edward's office, once a symbol of power and control, now felt suffocating. Lucas stood, facing the man who, until recently, he believed to be his father. Edward, for his part, seemed to have aged years in just a few hours, the weight of secrets finally taking their toll. Why? Lucas finally broke the silence, his voice trembling with emotion. Why did you hide me all these years? Why lie? Edward sighed deeply, running a hand over his tired face. Lucas, you have to understand. The situation was impossible. How could I explain to a child that he was, well, that he wasn't exactly who he thought he was? So you thought it was better to just abandon me? Lucas retorted, years of hurt spilling over. Leave me to grow up not knowing who I really was. I thought I was protecting you, Edward replied, his voice breaking. Project Phoenix. It was dangerous. There were people who would do anything to get their hands on the technology. On you. Lucas shook his head, incredulous. And now that I know, what changes? Edward walked to the window, silent for a moment, watching the lights of New York. When he turned, his eyes were wet. Lucas, there's more to this story than you know. More than even I knew until recently. The boy frowned. What do you mean? Edward hesitated, as if weighing his next words carefully. Project Phoenix. It wasn't just about bringing Charlie back. It was about something much bigger, something that could change the course of human history. Lucas felt a shiver run down his spine. What? Immortality, Edward whispered. Or something very close to it, the ability to transfer consciousness, to completely rejuvenate a human being. You, Lucas, are the living proof that it's possible. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with impossible implications. But how? Lucas finally managed to ask. Edward approached, his eyes intense. Your DNA, Lucas. It's not just a copy of Charlie's. It's evolved, modified in ways that we still don't fully understand. Lucas staggered, feeling dizzy. Sophia, who had been observing quietly from the corner of the room, stepped forward to support him. "Dad," she intervened, "are you saying that Lucas is, what, some kind of advanced human?" Edward nodded slowly. "Dr. Mendez believes that, with time and proper development, Lucas could have capabilities beyond current comprehension, accelerated regeneration, resistance to diseases, perhaps even extreme longevity." Lucas felt the world spinning around him. He wasn't just a clone, but something more, something beyond. "Is that why these people are after me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Edward confirmed. "If they can replicate what was done to you, the implications would be unimaginable." Sophia, who had been typing furiously on her tablet, suddenly gasped. "Dad, Lucas, look at this." She turned the screen towards them. It was a recent news article, dated just a few hours ago. The headline screamed, "Revolutionary Scientific Breakthrough Promises Human Rebirth." The company behind this, Sophia explained, her voice urgent, is a subsidiary of a larger conglomerate. And guess who's on the board? Dr. Ernesto Vargas. Edward visibly paled. "Impossible. Who is Ernesto Vargas?" Lucas asked, feeling like he was missing something crucial. "A long-time rival of your father. I mean, of Charlie," Edward explained, his voice tense. "He was always obsessed with surpassing our achievements. If he's found out about Project Phoenix, he's the one behind the threats," Sophia concluded. Lucas felt the weight of realization fall upon him. It wasn't just about discovering the truth about his origins now. It was about preventing potentially catastrophic technology from falling into the wrong hands. "What do we do now?" he asked, looking between Edward and Sophia. Edward straightened his shoulders, a renewed determination in his eyes. "Now, we fight. We fight to protect you, Lucas, and to prevent Vargas from getting this technology." Sophia placed a reassuring hand on Lucas's shoulder. "And we find out more about who you really are and what you're capable of." Lucas nodded slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility but also a strange sense of purpose. He was more than just Lucas, more than just a copy of Charlie. He was the key to something much larger. As the three began to make plans, the impossibility of the situation hung over them. A boy who was both child and adult, a scientific experiment and a miracle of nature. The full truth was yet to be revealed. But one thing was certain. The world as they knew it was about to change forever, and Lucas was at the center of it all. The tension in Edward's office was palpable. Lucas and Sophia and Edward were gathered around a table strewn with documents, old photos, and reports from Project Phoenix. Dr. Mendez had arrived moments earlier, carrying a sealed folder that promised to contain the final answers they all sought. "Before we open this, Doctor," Mendez said, his voice grave, "you need to understand that what you're about to discover will challenge everything you believe about science, ethics, and the very nature of human existence." Lucas swallowed hard, his heart pounding in his chest. "We're ready," he said, though he wasn't sure if he really was. Mendez nodded solemnly and opened the folder. "Lucas, what do you know about your conception?" I thought I was a clone of Charlie," Lucas replied, uncertain. "That's only part of the truth," Mendez explained. "In reality, you are the biological son of Charlie, but not in the way you imagine." Edward gasped as if struck. "What? How is that possible?" Mendez pulled out a document from the folder. Project Phoenix wasn't just about cloning or consciousness transfer. It was about creating a form of life that could carry the genetic and mental legacy of a person, but with the ability to grow and evolve naturally. "Are you saying that I am, what, a super advanced test tube baby?" Lucas asked, his voice trembling. "More than that," Mendez continued. "You are the result of an impossible fusion of technologies. Charlie's DNA was used as a base, but it was modified, enhanced, and then, through a process we still don't fully understand, that DNA was used to create a viable embryo." Sophia, who had been silent, finally spoke. "But what about my Aunt Maria? What's her role in all this?" Mendez exchanged a significant look with Edward before continuing. Maria wasn't just a nurse on the project. She is Lucas's biological mother. The silence that followed was deafening. Lucas felt as if the ground had vanished beneath his feet. "Wait," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Ferg, you're saying that Charlie and Maria are my biological parents, but how Charlie was dying," Edward completed, his voice heavy with emotion. "Charlie was dying, and he and Maria, they loved each other. Project Phoenix offered an impossible chance." Mendez nodded. "We used Charlie's modified DNA to fertilize one of Maria's eggs. The result was you, Lucas. Our child who carries Charlie's genetic legacy. Born of Maria, but with capabilities that go beyond what any of us could have imagined." Lucas looked at his hands, as if expecting to see them differently. "So, I am myself. I'm not Charlie reborn." "You are you, Lucas," Mendez assured, "but you also carry a part of Charlie. His memories, his experiences, are encoded in your DNA in a way we're still trying to understand." Edward, who had been silent, finally spoke. I didn't know. Not all of this. When Lucas was born, when I saw how much he looked like Charlie, I panicked. I thought we had gone too far." "Is that why you pushed me away?" Lucas asked, years of hurt in his voice. Edward nodded, tears in his eyes. "I thought I was protecting you, from Vargas, from others who wanted the technology, and from myself, from my guilt." Sophia, who had been processing everything in silence, suddenly gasped. "Wait, if Uncle Charlie is Lucas's biological father, and you're Uncle Charlie's brother, that means—" "Lucas is my nephew," Edward completed, looking at the boy with new eyes. "My nephew, not my son." Lucas felt his head spinning with the implications. His entire life, his entire identity, was being rewritten before his eyes. "But why now?" he asked. "Why are all these revelations coming out now?" Mendez sighed heavily. "Because time is running out. The unique capabilities of your DNA are beginning to manifest, Lucas. And there are people, like Vargas, who would do anything to obtain that power." "What kind of capabilities?" Sophia asked, a mix of fear and fascination in her voice. "Accelerated regeneration, resistance to diseases, enhanced cognitive abilities," Mendez listed, "and potentially the key to a form of immortality." The weight of this revelation fell upon everyone in the room. Lucas, a 10-year-old boy who carried within him the potential to change the course of human history. "What do we do now?" Lucas asked, his voice small in the face of the magnitude of the situation. Edward stood, determination in his eyes. "Now, we protect you, and we find a way to use this knowledge for good, not for greed or power." Sophia took Lucas's hand. "And we discover who you really are, Lucas. Not just your DNA or your capabilities, but you as a person." Lucas looked at everyone in the room, Edward, his uncle, Sophia, his cousin, Dr. Mendez, the man who helped create him, and he thought of Maria, his mother, in every way that mattered. He was the impossible made real, a boy born of love, science, and a desperate chance for a future. And now, facing a truth that defied his understanding, Lucas knew that his journey to understand who he really was had only just begun. With a deep breath, he nodded. "I'm ready," he said. "Let's find out what this all means, together." And so, faced with the impossible revealed, a new chapter of the story began to unfold. The silence that followed the revelations was deafening. Each person in the room seemed to be struggling to process the weight of the newly discovered truths. Lucas, at the center of it all, felt as if he were observing the world through a foggy glass, disconnected from the reality around him. Edward was the first to break the silence, his voice rough with emotion. "Lucas, I'm sorry for everything, for hiding the truth, for pushing you away." Lucas raised his eyes, meeting Edward's gaze. Where he once saw a potential father, he now saw an uncle, a man tormented by years of secrets and guilt. "Why?" was all he could manage to ask. "Fear," Edward admitted, running a hand over his tired face. fear of what we had created, of the power you represent, and shame for allowing the project to go so far. Sophia, who had been silent, approached Lucas, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "How are you feeling?" she asked softly. Lucas shook his head, tears beginning to form in his eyes. "I don't know, it's like I don't know who I am anymore. Am I Lucas? Am I Charlie? Am I some kind of experiment?" Dr. Mendez approached, his face a mask of compassion and concern. "Lucas, you are yourself, unique, special, but still yourself. Charlie's DNA, the encoded memories, they are just a part of who you are." "But what if I start to remember?" Lucas asked, his voice trembling. "What if I wake up one day and I'm more Charlie than Lucas?" The sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway interrupted the conversation. The office door burst open, revealing Maria, breathless and with eyes wide with fear and concern. "Lucas!" she exclaimed, rushing to embrace her son. "Oh, my dear." Lucas clung to her, the tears finally falling. "Mom, did you know about all of this?" Maria pulled back slightly, holding Lucas's face in her hands. "I knew you were special, that your origin was unusual. But no, I didn't know everything. I didn't know how extraordinary you really are." As mother and son reconciled, everyone's attention was drawn to a new sound, slow, deliberate footsteps approaching. Her figure appeared in the doorway, making Edward pale. "Charlie," he whispered, incredulous. The man in the doorway was the living image of Lucas, only a few decades older. His eyes swept the room, finally resting on the boy in Maria's arms. "Hello, Lucas," he said softly. "I've waited a long time for this moment." Chaos erupted in the room. Edward lunged forward, a mix of anger and disbelief on his face. "You're alive! All this time, and you were alive!" Charlie raised a hand, stopping Edward's advance. "Not exactly alive, brother. Not in the way you think." Dr. Mendez stepped forward, his eyes wide. "Impossible, the consciousness transfer, it worked." Charlie nodded slowly. "In a way, my consciousness was preserved, floating in a state between life and death, until Lucas was born." Lucas gently extricated himself from Maria's arms, taking a hesitant step towards Charlie. You're inside me." "Not exactly," Charlie explained, his voice gentle. "I am an echo consciousness. A part of me lives within you, Lucas. In your encoded memories, in your enhanced DNA, but you are yourself. I am just a visitor." Edward, recovering from the initial shock, advanced again. "Why now, Charlie? Why appear after all this time?" Charlie turned to his brother, sadness in his eyes. "Because the danger is real, Edward. Vargas and others like him, they are close to discovering the secret. And if they succeed, they will have the power to play God," Edward completed, understanding dawning on his face. Lucas, feeling the weight of his existence more than ever, spoke. "What am I? What can I do?" Charlie knelt in front of Lucas, meeting his eyes. "You, my son, are the future. A future that neither I nor Edward nor anyone could have foreseen. You have the potential to heal diseases, to extend life, and to change the very course of human evolution. But what if I don't want this power?" Lucas asked, his voice small and scared. "What if I just want to be normal?" Maria approached, placing a protective hand on Lucas's shoulder. "You will always be my son, Lucas." "Normal or extraordinary?" Charlie nodded in agreement. "The power is within you, Lucas, but how you use it, if you use it, is your choice." Edward, who had been observing the scene in silence, finally spoke. "What do we do now, Vargas and the others?" "Now," Charlie said, standing up, "we fight. We protect Lucas and the knowledge he represents. And we find a way to use this power for the good of humanity, not for greed or control." Lucas looked around the room, at Maria, his mother in every way that mattered, at Edward, the uncle who had sacrificed so much to protect him, at Sophia, the cousin who had become his ally and friend, at Dr. Mendez, whose work had brought him into existence, and finally at Charlie, his biological father and the key to his extraordinary future. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of destiny on his young shoulders. "I don't know what the future holds," he said, his voice gaining strength, "but I know that whatever I'm capable of, I want to use it to help, to make a difference." A proud smile spread across Charlie's face. "That's my boy." And so, faced with the revealed truths and the battles to come, the unlikely family united. The impossible had become reality, and the future, though uncertain, promised to be extraordinary. The sun rose over New York, its golden rays streaming through the windows of the Smith mansion, illuminating a scene that, just 24 hours ago, would have seemed impossible. In the living room, Lucas sat between Maria and Charlie, with Edward, Sophia, and Dr. Mendez completing the circle. The silence that hung over them was heavy, laden with recent revelations and raw emotions. Lucas looked at his hands, turning them slowly as if expecting to see some visible sign of his extraordinary nature. "So," he began, breaking the silence, "I'm me, but I'm also a bit of you." He looked at Charlie, his eyes filled with confusion and curiosity. Charlie nodded gently. "You are Lucas above all else, but you carry a part of me within you. My memories, my knowledge, encoded in your DNA in a way that science is still trying to fully understand." Maria squeezed Lucas's hand. "You will always be my son, Lucas. Nothing changes that." Lucas turned to her, tears in his eyes. "Why did you never tell me?" "About my origin." Maria exchanged a quick glance with Edward before answering. "At first it was out of fear of what others might do if they found out. And then, well, how do you explain something like this to a child?" Edward leaned forward, his face a mask of regret. "It's my fault, Lucas. I insisted on the secrecy. I thought I was protecting you, protecting all of us, but now I see that I only caused more pain." Sophia, who had been observing quietly, finally spoke. "So, technically, Lucas is my cousin, and Uncle Charlie is alive, but not really." Dr. Mendez cleared his throat. "Mr. Charlie's situation is unique. His consciousness exists in a state we might call digital limbo. He can manifest as we're seeing now, but he doesn't have a permanent physical body. It's strange," Charlie admitted with a sad smile, "to be here, to see all of you, and to know that I am more a memory than a real person." Lucas stood up abruptly, walking to the window. All eyes followed him. "All my life," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "I felt different, like there was something more to me, something I couldn't understand. And now you know the truth," Edward completed softly. Lucas turned to face his improbable family. "But what is the truth? That I'm some kind of scientific experiment, a boy with superpowers, the son of a man who is dead but not?" Maria stood up, approaching Lucas. "The truth, my love, is that you are loved. By me, by your father, by your uncle, by all of us. The rest we will figure out together." Charlie joined them, placing an ethereal hand on Lucas's shoulder. "You have a gift, Lucas, a gift that can change the world. But how you use that gift, that is your choice." Edward, who had been silent, finally stood up. "Lucas, I made many mistakes. I kept secrets that should never have been kept. I pushed you away when I should have embraced you. Can I have a second chance?" The silence that followed seemed to stretch on forever. Lucas looked at Edward, at the man he once thought was his father, now revealed as his uncle. He saw the regret in his eyes, the tentative hope for redemption. "I don't know if I can forget," Lucas said finally. "But maybe we can start over." A hesitant smile formed on Edward's face. "I would like that very much." Sophia stepped forward, wrapping Lucas in a tight hug. "Well, cousin, it looks like our family just got a whole lot more interesting." Lucas laughed, the sound breaking the tension in the room. "I guess it did." Dr. Mendez cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "There is still much we need to understand about Lucas's capabilities. And more importantly, we need to protect him from people like Vargas who would do anything to obtain this knowledge. The mention of Vargas brought a renewed seriousness to the room. Edward nodded gravely. We need a plan to keep Lucas safe and to ensure that this technology doesn't fall into the wrong hands. But what about me? Lucas asked, his voice small. So what if I start to change? What if Charlie's memories start to take over? Charlie knelt in front of Lucas, meeting his eyes. Lucas, listen to me. You are you. My memories, my knowledge, they are there to help you, not to control you. You have the power to choose who you want to be. Maria joined them, wrapping Lucas in a protective embrace. And no matter what happens, we will be here for you, all of us. Lucas looked around the room at the faces of his newly discovered family. He saw love, concern, and determination in each of them. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, he felt at home. Okay, he said, taking a deep breath. So, what do we do now? Edward took the lead. Now we prepare. Vargas and his associates won't give up easily. We need to be ready to protect Lucas and the knowledge he represents. Dr. Mendez nodded. I will gather all the documentation on Project Phoenix. We need to fully understand what Lucas is capable of. And I, Sophia said, a determined gleam in her eyes, will use my hacking skills to keep an eye on Vargas's activities. He won't catch us by surprise. Charlie smiled, pride evident on his face. And I will be here, ready to help Lucas navigate his unique abilities. Together, we will discover the true potential of what we have created. Lucas looked at each of them, feeling a wave of gratitude and determination. Thank you, he said simply, for everything. As the sun rose higher in the New York sky, the unlikely family came together in a collective embrace. The impossible had become reality. Long-held secrets had been revealed, and the future, though uncertain, seemed full of possibilities. Lucas, at the center of it all, closed his eyes and allowed himself, for the first time in a long while, to feel hope. He didn't know what the future held, what challenges they would face, or what wonders his unique abilities might unlock. But he knew one thing for sure. He was no longer alone, and so, embraced by his newly discovered family, Lucas prepared to face the impossible. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with dangers and uncertainties, but with love, understanding, and the strength of his united family, he was ready for whatever fate might throw his way. The impossible had become his reality. And Lucas, the boy who was both himself and something more, was ready to embrace his extraordinary destiny. A year had passed since that fateful night when Lucas discovered the truth about his extraordinary origins. Now, at 11 years old, he sat on the porch of the Smith family's beach house, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The notebook on his lap was open, its pages filled with his careful handwriting, telling a story that few would believe was true. Lucas smiled to himself, reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought him to this moment. He began to write, his words flowing freely. A year ago, I was just an ordinary boy, or at least that's what I thought. I was searching for answers about my father, about my identity. Little did I know that the answers I would find would challenge everything I believed to be possible. I discovered that I am the result of a revolutionary scientific experiment, that I carry within me the enhanced DNA and encoded memories of a man who should be dead, my biological father, Charlie, that my mother, Maria, loved and protected me, keeping a secret that must have weighed heavily on her soul all these years. I learned that family is not defined solely by blood or DNA, but by love, loyalty, and the choices we make every day. Edward, my uncle, the man I once thought was my father, made mistakes, big mistakes. But I saw in him a fierce determination to make things right, to protect me, and to use his power and influence for good. Our relationship, once distant and complicated, is now one of mutual understanding and growing respect. Sophia, my cousin, has become more than family. She is my best friend and confidant. Her intelligence and technological skills have been crucial in keeping us one step ahead of Vargas and his associates. Together, we form an unbeatable team, navigating the challenges of being extraordinary teenagers in a world that isn't ready for us. And Charlie, my biological father, a digital consciousness and an echo of the man he once was. Our conversations, though surreal, have taught me more about myself and my potential than I could have ever imagined. Through him, I'm learning to access memories and knowledge that transcend my young age. Dr. Mendez continues his studies, amazed by the capabilities I am slowly developing. Accelerated regeneration, resistance to diseases, enhanced cognitive abilities, gifts that I carry with a mixture of awe and responsibility. As for Vargas and the others who seek the secret of Project Phoenix, they are still out there. But we are no longer on the defensive. With Edward's influence, Sophia's brilliance, Charlie's guidance, and my own developing powers, we are working to use this knowledge for the good of humanity. We founded the Phoenix Institute, an organization dedicated to ethical research in cellular regeneration and life extension. Our goal is not to create superhumans or achieve immortality, but to improve the quality of life for everyone. Each advancement we make is carefully considered, always with the greater good in mind. But it's not all grand missions and monumental responsibilities. There are moments of pure joy as well. Moments like now, watching the sun set with my family. Moments when I am just Lucas, an 11-year-old boy who loves playing video games with his cousin, who still needs his mother's help picking out clothes for school, who argues with his uncle about which football team is the best. My identity, it is mine to define. I am Lucas, son of Maria and Charlie, nephew of Edward, cousin of Sophia. I am a boy with an extraordinary destiny, but I am also just a boy, and that duality, that complexity, is what makes me unique. The impossible became possible in my life. I learned that the limits of what we believe to be real are often just the limits of our imagination. That family can be formed and reformed, that love can overcome secrets and lies, that forgiveness has a transformative power that rivals even the most advanced science. I look to the future with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. What challenges await us? What wonders will we discover? How will I balance my extraordinary life with the desire for normality? I don't have all the answers, but I have my family, I have love, I have purpose, and perhaps in the end that's all that really matters. Lucas closed the notebook, feeling a peace he hadn't thought possible a year ago. The sound of footsteps made him turn. "Hey, junior scientist," Sophia teased, sitting down next to him. "Ready for dinner?" "Uncle Edward is trying to make paella, and honestly, I'm a little scared." Lucas laughed. "He knows we can just order food, right?" "Ah, but where would be the fun in that?" Edward shouted from the kitchen, making them both laugh. Maria appeared on the porch, her face serene. "Lucas, dear, can you help set the table?" "Sure, Mom," Lucas replied, standing up. As he headed inside, Lucas paused for a moment, taking in the scene. Edward in the kitchen, muttering under his breath as he tried not to burn dinner. Sophia helping Maria organize the plates, the two of them chatting and laughing. And there, almost imperceptible, the translucent form of Charlie, smiling proudly at his gathered family. Lucas felt his heart swell with love and gratitude. This was his family, imperfect, extraordinary, united by bonds that went beyond blood or science. "Hey, all of you," he called, making everyone turn. "I love you. Just wanted you to know that." For a moment, everyone paused what they were doing, identical smiles spreading across